we wanted to leave enough time for questions or discussion.
So I'm very excited about what you're doing. I think your model is amazing. We have a lot of opportunity to replicate it here, so it's very exciting. The one thing that that I have found, my daughter's autistic, and so just things that we've been involved in before, things we've tried to be a part of and were turned away from, which is why we started Girls Club and got that going, is because autism is such a spectrum, and some girls are more independent, some girls require more support. How does your program work, or does it, for girls that require a lot of support or who might be non-speaking or things like that? Have you come across that? How do you make it as inclusive as you can when there's such a wide range of across the spectrum? That's
a great question. And in 2008, when I started this, I told my mentor, I said, I don't want to exclude anyone. I'm really not a fan of the term high functioning, and so I wanted to have something that was going to be inviting for everyone. And our group makeup is variable in terms of ability, in terms of interest and interactions. We have girls that are ready to go and they're excited and they're in your space and they're talking to everyone, and then we have girls that are just walking right off from people. And so it is a vast array of people, and we have these supports that we create. So when we do some research, we talk about having a certain reading level, at least a 4th grade reading level, so you could read some of the supports that we use. But outside of the research context, then we'll adapt. So we have some I'm doing this because I use lots of nonverbal gestures, but we have conversation cue cards that has writing on there. So we've adapted them to have larger print. We had a young woman who's visually impaired be part of our program. So we did that for her, or, make it shorter words. We have had a couple girls who've had limited language involved. And so she's participating, maybe not as much in talking with other people, but, engaging with other people. She really liked dancing. I remember, once you find what it is that she's interested in, I always ask that initial interview Jessica talked about earlier. We say, okay, tell us about the participant, your daughter, this young woman. What does she need? What is helpful to her? What is challenging for her? Not because we want to exclude her, but because outside of this hat, we wear hats where we do positive behavioral supports kinds of things. We do other types of interventions. So I wanted to know, and it was my first or second group. I had a young woman who had some really challenging behaviors and would rip her shirt off when she got upset, which out and about in the community can cause, some excitement. And her mom, I went back to her and said, you said she didn't need any support, but let's talk about what she needs. And she just said, I'm sorry, I wanted a clean slate. And I said, I understand that, because I bet you've had some experiences where you were excluded. And I said, I don't want to do that, but I want to make sure that the experiences is positive. So, but I can tell you there's been challenges, I'm not related to including everyone. We've not turned anyone away. We've had families that have shied away. A mom came to one of our community events, and we go back and forth about, all right, you need to come and we need to know more about you before you could just show up at one of our events, right, because we want to plan accordingly for you, not because we want to exclude you. But right, she was like, oh, I'm not sure if she should be here. And I'm like, no, she's here. We are here to invite her. The other families around, or the other girls here, are going to be tolerant or not, but that's okay, because that's how it is in life. And so we really, I guess that was a long response to, it has been my mission the whole time to include everyone, but I also recognize that a lot of the things that we do may not be as powerful, but maybe that's okay.
I was going to say it's all about getting to know the person who's coming, and I do think that there's an opportunity over the course of I think we were talking a little bit about kind of the advantages and disadvantages of having something that's more of a drop-in or come when you can kind of experience versus that longer term experience. And when you've had, I think over the course of weeks, as you get to know each other and understand what support is the right fit, then that's been kind of the key to making it work.
So that is, I think, a caveat for when we talk about implementing what we do. One of actually Bob, the dad that you heard from, he said, Dr. Shetler and Dr. Jameson hide therapy and these, fun activities. But it is, we are right now, we're trained in lots of different types of interventions and supports. And so when something happens, we feel prepared. And so we're really working on, well, what does that look like if it's someone who doesn't have all that training and background? And so we're supervising the facilitators there, but ultimately we want to not have to be there all the time. And so this training model, we want to have this certification, and along with that needs to be some training on how what we've found in terms of supports if something did happen, because I've had a few times that, there's been incidents that weren't good.
You briefly touched on extending the program to younger ages and to older ages. What would this program look like for a younger age group, say 5 to 10-year-olds? Would there still be community involvement, or would it be more play skills based?
We talk about the existing model that we have being reflective of our situation in terms of being at a medical center and the fee for service, but we are both school psychologists by our doctoral degrees are in school psychology, and so we worked in schools for several years. So we talk about this model being if individuals are at a school, to use it in a school setting, because then the networks that you would build would be people who you are seeing on a more regular basis. You could go to activities at school, whether it's theater events or sports events or clubs that are going on, so you can get involved in the network that you're at. And definitely, I think one of the most important things is that what we're doing seems to match with what the individual needs and meeting their goals, as well as what their kind of job is at that time period. So it would be, play skills. So right now, piloting the GNO Junior is what we're trying to figure out. Well, what are the things that we want to work on, or places we want to go, or things we want to do, based on what we know from our research and based on what we know from, kind of where we start to see these gaps in the complexity. And so as we continue to go down those age ranges, we would want to focus on those types of things. Place, where you're at now, maybe some play skills, and in the settings that you're going to be in. So your community might be at school or a play group or, a birthday party type of setting. But then, also anticipating the next steps. That's something we've been talking about is, teaching or, working on some of the things they're going to need soon. And so.
I have another question here from the audience on a card, and it says, what interventions or methodologies does GNO provide to parents to use at home? So how do you help families extend this, or do you extend this in the home environment?
Mm-hmm. I would say that is the way we try to keep parents kind of informed and supported is to, be frequent communicators about kind of, here's where we're going to be, these are the kinds of skills we're going to be working on. The homework assignment, that's a piece of each event or each session that we hold. Parents also are aware of that, and we'll give them some concrete suggestions about how to be supportive in the practicing of that homework. I wouldn't say that we have a really formalized parent training component.
It's always been, when I first started, I used to send this message to families and say, here's the skills, or, here's the ways you can reinforce this at home. And honestly, from an organizational perspective, then I wasn't doing that as much. But when we talk about P&O, it's this simultaneous event where sometimes it's connecting families and sometimes it's bringing in a speaker. But we've been talking about, making that more formal, and what would we outline that's corresponding to GNO. There's a component, what we know is, the girls, they bring home this book and they have an assignment, and then they have this, what I did this week sheet, and they're supposed to self-monitor and check it off. And that's always a challenge too, is figuring out, okay, well, get your family involved, whether it's your parent or whether it's a sibling or a friend that's around you, say, did you do that? Let me see how you're doing on that. Because I know I all need, checks and balances. I often don't sign my children's homework or get involved, and so I think that it's being strategic.
And I would say too that the parents of the gals in our program, there's a lot more kind of informal support that happens. So it's not uncommon that as we're sort of walking people to the car, to whoever's picking them up, that we're maybe troubleshooting or anticipating something that's coming up, or here's something I've been thinking about, what do you know about this? Kind of that ongoing conversation and support. I think most of the caregivers that have been a part of the group have felt that they could kind of reach out and be accessible in that way. So there's not necessarily a formalized training component for parents, but I do think we try to be very intentional about providing kind of incidental supports as they're needed.
That'd be good. So.
I just had a question, taking like what you guys are doing, looking at the older teens into the young adults and what they're doing with Felicity House, was it? Okay, has there been any thought that you guys have had about maybe coming up with something that's like either like a week long or a weekend where they come and they spend the entire time and they learn skills like cooking as well and sharing in those tasks and the social fun that can go along with like creating a kebab dinner type thing for everybody or whatever?
I mean, and those of activities, all those types of activities,
I would say we have done like progressive dinners and things like that as part of the regular skills group, but we have also explored the idea of doing I talked about kind of this, what our current schedule typically looks like as far as following an academic year, and then this summer is kind of a tricky period, at least for the girls that we've had participate so far, is that people are traveling or they have other commitments, but we have thought about something like a camp where we do, focus on those skills for a shorter period of time, and we perhaps get more intensity of time and supports, but over a shorter progression of time, if that makes sense. But that's not something that we've actively implemented at this point, but that's a great idea.
And we go out into the community, we've done things like cooking activities or making something, all over the place, but having that space, that gathering space where you could have some of those kitchen, laundry, those types of things, and work on some independence, but in a, kind of more interesting way,
Or a friendlier and more fun kind of thing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for what you are doing and saying it's fabulous. As a parent and a teacher, I tend to be perhaps overprotective in terms of students with ASD. So my question is, how do you recruit the neurotypical peers? Do you expect them to have a previous knowledge of ASD, or how do they come to you? Do they benefit because of some kind of volunteering need, or do they actually have a heart to work with students on the spectrum, or girls in this case on the spectrum?
I would say there's sort of all of those things. Girls, our peers come to us from a variety of kind of pathways. We've sent out recruiting flyers and things like that. We have some partnerships with local school districts and other community groups, Girl Scouts, volleyball clubs, things like that, where we've, alternately emailed flyers out to people and gotten some responses, but also kind of having to go out and speak about Girls Night Out and what it is to different groups and then getting some interest. And, there are a number of the high schools in the areas where we live, they do have a community service hour requirement that for some girls, they initially become intrigued because they know it's something that they want to do. But we're also very conscious of wanting peers to be really informed about what they're committing to and the level of engagement that we expect from them. So many of the girls who do decide to be peers, I would say we'd have to go back and look and see the kind of experience with disabilities or not. I would say we've had wonderful peers that had no experience before, and people who had siblings or family members also. And we have had some girls who are interested in perhaps pursuing work in this field in the future, and we're exploring this opportunity from that perspective. But I think what we found the most is that our peers who contributed, in incredibly meaningful ways were just people who were willing to learn, willing to stretch themselves, willing to be kind and supportive of each other, and willing to learn from one another.
And sometimes, I mentioned it when I talk about peer training, we emphasize you are not a helper. Someone will say, oh, I was the best buddy, or, no, you're not a helper. You're a member of this group. We're going to give you we tell you a little bit about, autism and what that might look like in terms of what you might encounter. But we also give the tips kind of along the way if we're working on skills. But it's sometimes the coolest peers, the girls who have made the best peers are the ones that are just a little bit interesting themselves, or just didn't really care, you know, and put themselves out there, because we'll focus on genuineness. So sometimes that's what we'll see some girls, and they're like, got that different voice, and we're like, all right, so we'll talk to people about what the expectations are, and we give challenges. So okay, we'll challenge, that you're gonna ask for other people's opinions. So we set our peers up to then inquire during goal setting activities to ask other people their ideas, so that then they are putting others in a leadership role, and then we'll use some of those same strategies, the bucks and the specific reinforcement. Oh, I like how you were relating to her. It seemed like you were really genuinely interested in what she had to say. And so, it's the peers that have outcomes too, and we see them shift over time. And I've written many letters to girls that have gone on to do.
Like letters of reference.
Yeah, letters of reference, to go on to do different types of activities. There are a lot of outcomes we haven't captured, one of which is the peer influence on them, and then the community partners.